This episode is brought to you by Yin and Fang toothpaste. Yin and Fang toothpaste is 4 ingredients: coconut oil, baking soda, cacao butter, and nanohydroxyapatite. It's non-toxic. There's no preservatives. It has a low abrasivity, which preserves your teeth. It's supportive of the oral and gut microbiome, and it's remineralizing. Okay, welcome. I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Lauryn Lax. I'm really excited about this podcast. I was telling Whit, gut health is definitely something that I think about often and work with clients on. And I just think it's really the focus of health. It's kind of the centerpiece. Mm-hmm. And I'm super excited to have you here. So thanks for being here. Why don't you just start us off by introducing yourself for people who don't know who you are, although I think a lot of people in the Austin community definitely do. Give us kind of a background of, I don't know, education, whatever you think is relevant, and kind of what got you here.
Yeah, definitely. So excited to be here with y'all today. Thanks for asking me, and love the topic of all things gut health. And little did I know that I would love that, though. Growing up, I never said I wanted to be a gut health specialist or even a functional medicine practitioner. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be the next Katie Couric on the Today Show. So that was my life path. I was set up broadcast news journalist, went to UT, Texas, and studied that. And that's actually how I ended up in Austin, of all things. They just had a really great journalism program. Mm-hmm. So that was my life path. But the big man upstairs always has different plans, and a lot of times they're better than what we could even imagine. Yeah. Little did I know, a big reason why I'd be here in Austin as a community is we're really a functional medicine capital of, I would say, the world now. And just so many people are moving here for that. But that was not what I was set out there to do. My story really begins, though, back at 4th grade recess when I was 10 years old, pink scrunchie in my frizzy hair that my mom made me wear, and all I wanted to do was fit in. And one day at recess, the popular girls invited me to join their gossip circle, where they were laughing at Melanie Strawn's ugly sweater or gawking over Eric Arthur's cute freckly face. And then the topic of weight came up. And the queen bee said, "Oh my gosh, you guys, I weighed myself last night and I'm 69 pounds, so fat." And then just looked to each of us and said, "What do you weigh?" So one by one, we had to go around this gossip circle and report to the drill sergeant. And at 10 years old, 80 pounds, I was by no means a fat kid. But when the circle got to me, I gulped and I lied. And I said, "I don't know." And I'll never forget going home that day and standing in the pantry and turning over my favorite Dorito snack pack for my snack time, like I did every day, but learning a brand new language, which is fat, grams, and calories. And at age 10, my life path took a really sharp turn. And little did I know that I would spend the next 20 plus years on a roller coaster of diets, dogmas, Dr. Google searches, doctor's offices, treatment centers. I spent 5 years accumulated of my young life living what I call behind bars in these hospitals and treatment centers, where the treatments were really symptom-based treatments. Just like a person that has maybe autoimmune disease, we say take a pill for your ill, or obesity or just overweight, move more, eat less. So my symptoms of my eating disorder, of which had developed, was processed foods, obviously. Mm-hmm. So inside treatment, it was Pop-Tarts, pizza, Prozac. And then outside treatment, I did every single diet under the sun. If you've ever heard of the fasting diet, I was a trendsetter for that. Mm-hmm. And then when I knew I needed some sustenance, it was Atkins, South Beach, then paleo, vegan, carnivore, anything and everything. I was kind of a trendsetter for it, but to the nth degree. Yeah. To the point that it just made me unwell. And really, as my eating disorder went on, it wasn't about being 69 pounds like this 10-year-old girl anymore. It became so much more about a sense of identity, self-worth, control, something I was really good at, achievement. I'm very much a go-getter in life and wanted to be the best at whatever I did. Mm-hmm. And I was a really good dieter. So fast forward, age 23, I found myself, I was living in Nashville at the time, and I was in grad school up there studying to get my doctorate in occupational therapy, of all things. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget another day waking up and seeing a number I had not seen since I was that 10-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. Actually 1 pound less. And only this time I was a full-fledged adult. And it wasn't my parents standing over me or my doctor standing over me telling me tisk tisk, you need to get well. I was living, completely on my own volition, and was just had this moment of, is this really what my life is about? And it really explained all the chest pains I had been experiencing and the gut pains I would get every time I ate anything, and all the stress fractures on my feet that I would run 10 miles per hour on treadmills for hours and hours. So on my way to the gym that morning at 5 a.m., I prayed out loud, like, God, help me make a change today. And I was crying out and tears streaming down my face. And I just knew I wanted something different. And when I got to the YMCA parking lot in Nashville, not one, but 9 other strangers walked up, and they stepped in and spoke up and said they wanted to help. And these were 9 other gym goers that had seen me all the past year and a half, and didn't know anything about my backstory. All they saw was that a girl was killing herself on the Stairmaster every day and working out 8 hours plus a day in this gym. And they just knew there was so much more for me. And in that moment, something inside me melted. And when they said, we want to help you, take you to the hospital, like I heard the word hospital, my spidey senses went up because I knew what that meant. But something inside me just really was like, maybe this was an answer to my prayer that I just prayed. 48 hours later, I found myself in the CCU with a heart rate in the near 20s and doctors saying I may not make it. And I know without a doubt, had they not stepped in that day, I would not be here talking to you today. And I remember staring up at all these bright lights as the doctors are saying we may need to call code blue. My parents were by my bedside by that time. They were so thankful that these individuals had stepped in and had driven in from Arkansas, is where they live. And I heard in that moment, like, Lauryn, buckle up your seatbelt. It's going to be a ride, and you're going to make it. But it is going to be a journey. And I made up my mind in that moment that I was going to live, not die as well. And just like got on the same timeline as big man upstairs and decided, on the back end of this, I'm going to help others. I'm healed to heal others. And I spent another year long in treatment, which was the classic Pop-Tarts, Pizza, Prozac model. Initially on like heart rate monitors, feeding tubes, IV fluids. But something inside me had changed this time. It wasn't like an external force. And I knew, again, life was going to be different on the other side. And so when I got out of treatment, I was in Miami by this time, like all the cities, tour day, everything. But is when I started to learn how to like crawl again and walk again in life, figuratively, and learn a new way of doing things. And I'm so thankful, like, for the communities I was introduced to at that time. Stumbled into a CrossFit community and then an awesome church community, of both which modeled to me like a healthier relationship, like food and exercise, but not the treatment way. And functional medicine happened to be really popular at the time, kind of within the CrossFit community. So it was really a gateway to me finding my career path and another way of healing. And you know, on the back end of that journey, I was healed in my head and my heart, and my body was much better, despite all the Pop-Tarts, Pizza, Prozac as well. But for the next decade, I had another journey ahead of me, which I never foresaw. And from all the years, my gut had been wrecked. My hormones had been all over the place, so much cortisol going on and stress. I developed all these autoimmune conditions, mast cell activation syndrome, mold, and Lyme disease, like 13 incurable illnesses that had cropped up over the course of this next 10 years. And I really say like healing from those things was my underground medical school. So I got to use the tools I began to learn in my functional medicine training on myself and became my own best experiment. And to the point where I was like so sick, and I was living in a toxic mold home, fast forward like several years later here in Austin. And that really exacerbated a lot of these underlying conditions as well. And my body just was not, my gut and my liver, gallbladder were not strong enough to detox from all the years previously. But like Mayo Clinic turned me away, Cleveland Clinic turned me away. No one could help me. And these doctors, I had one tell me directly in the ER, Lauryn, there's times conventional medicine will fail you. This is one of them. And that's when I had showed up like feeling like I was having a heart attack. It was a severe asthma attack. Well, fast forward about a year, like out of this journey, like I'm 33. So it's like actually 10 years total from age 23 to 33 when that doctor told me that. Something inside me just, again, like a big man upstairs, like, you're going to heal from this. And like, long story short, I am healed 100% from every condition I was diagnosed with. And a lot of it had to do with a total gut reset. So it kind of brings me to, again, my love for the gut. And your gut is the gateway to health. as well as your head and your heart. Like it is everything. So gut health, our microbiome is connected to our immune system, to our oral microbiome, to our brain health, to our hormones, etc. Like there is a pathway for every health condition you have. And I typify like gut types when clients come to me because a lot of people don't have bloating and constipation or digestive issues that they may correlate with the gut, but they have thyroid issues or they have insomnia or their skin, they just continue to break out. And that is a gut pathway that a lot of times that's the domino effect. If you've ever seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding, they use like Windex on everything.
Yeah.
Like gut health can really help a lot with the physical symptoms. And then the gut, head, and heart pathways as well. So your gut is called your second brain in literature, although I call it really your first brain because you have more neurons in here than any other part of your peripheral nervous system. So more brain cells in your gut. And 90% of the body is run by the subconscious mind, which is housed here versus the conscious mind up here. And so that gateway, it's just a walkie-talkie to your brain. You get stressed here, your conscious mind processes things and signals down that wire, and your gut and your microbiome react to it. And that's where a lot of health conditions stem from. Like 99% of all disease comes from stress of some sort. And then the gut-heart connection is just like the gut is the core of who you are. So this is where I do a lot of figurative work. But when we become more aware of like getting back to center really and coming back to who you are, there's so much that can happen from a health perspective as well. So just like finding joy again in my life, for example, I do a lot of work also with like human design work, which is like just basically a DNA for your personality. And like when I learned more about like how I make decisions best in life or how, I'm an Energizer bunny, like why that is. And it just like began to become more empowering when self-concept basically can change our external world. And so is within, so is without, basically. So that's a little bit of a summary of like what got me here today and why I love the gut so much.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's, that's such a wild story. And it's hard to not get emotional listening to you talk about it. That's like, having kids and you see them go through these, things that you never know what's going to be like a trigger, and that
sticky, like
right. You just never know what they're going to internalize. And that's, as a parent, that's like something you can't control for it, but it's like such a miracle. Like you said, like you've had all of these people that stepped in, and I know that your parents are really supportive and that have gotten you to this place of like healing. And you really are, anyone that knows you, you're such like a vibrant force in the community and just for health in general. So it's really cool to hear. We've known each other a while, but and I know of the stuff that you do, but to hear the story beginning to end, you don't often like sit down with a friend and listen to it. So that was like, it's just a really powerful, it's powerful to listen to. So one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking is, and I know this is something you believe and work with clients on too, and it's kind of the way I work as well. Just listening to how they put you in the hospital and you said like the Pop-Tarts, pizza, Prozac method, right? How wild that our system, you're kind of making a joke, but that really is what it is, right? Legit. They just feed you junk to try to like put weight on.
Because I have heard you reference that before, and then I heard you reference it again. Like, so explain like popcorn, pizza, Prozac. So Pop-Tarts. Pop-Tarts. Okay. Yeah.
It really like from day one when I was put into a hospital, it was like 4 Pop-Tarts showed up on my tray. I'm 10 years old at this time. Yeah. The kitchen had actually messed up that day. They were supposed to be just, the pack always had 2 in there. But the nurse was like, no, you're eating it all. And basically in that setting, it's force feeding. Otherwise they tube feed you and like hold you down kind of against your will. And so I ate it and then ended up throwing it up because my body couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And then was punished for that. And so then they like sit me back down in the hospital bed and they give me 2 Ensures or like Boosts, like shakes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of just like where I began to become so robotically disconnected from my body, because it was like I was like the eating disorder definitely I couldn't trust my body, but it's like even authorities were telling me I couldn't trust my body. Like they knew best what was best. And even though like later, fast forward, turns out I have celiac disease and like definitely lactose intolerance, but and my dad had celiac. But all these years, part of my refeeding, I mean, great part was like the food guide pyramid at the time was all grain. And so that really, it felt like being a prisoner in my own body in a way where in the treatment centers, it was like, just put on my like game face, my good girl face, get through it for like 3 to 6 months so they can think I was recovered and then just come out on the other side. Only like I'm just not learning tools how to like really nourish my body. And that was super empowering, like fast forward out of the eating disorder when I also went to nutrition school and just actually learning how nutrients were good things for the body.
The building blocks,
exactly.
Right? And, like, you need the good ones.
Totally. It wasn't just like macros and calories. And even if you think about diet culture, maybe they're not doing the Pop-Tarts, pizza, Prozac, but sometimes it can be so fixated on just like, we should do this or shouldn't do this, like rules where you become disconnected from how your body feels. Like even to the point, there was an article this week about a man eating the carnivore diet, and he ate so much butter. It was oozing out of his hands.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
It was just like so crazy, like what, and to the nth degree, like how disconnected he had to be from his body to even like, that didn't feel good probably leading up to that point.
Yeah.
But it's like, it becomes an identity. Like sometimes the diet culture does, and we don't, today I don't even call whatever it is, carnivore, keto. People don't use the word diet as much as they do like clean eating or healthy eating.
Right.
I feel like diet is kind of like a 90s word.
Yes.
But we still like are disconnected when it's more about like rules and shoulds and shouldn'ts versus like, man, how does my body really feel? And like how and what are the baseline essentials for like nourishing this organism?
Right.
Because food is like meant to be our body battery, and it, like kind of learning also about the gut and just basically how eating foods, how the gut processes your food. It's like you're not what you eat. It's like you are what you digest, basically.
Right.
And
and I was thinking also, but like how powerful, kind of what I was getting at is you can still, the body is so amazing. You can still put garbage in it, right?
Yes.
And because that, I think of food is, it really is like the battery. It's the foundation, right? It's the building blocks, and you have to put good fuel in, right? But at the same time, there's this other piece, right? Like you were saying, stress and like the connection between the gut and the brain and the heart and all of that. But there's also like joy and fulfillment and all the human condition of just like wanting to survive no matter what, right? So even though they're feeding you what you know to be, and probably what you felt like was garbage, right? Still there was like healing that took place, right?
Oh, I have so much to say on that too, but I have a story. I call it like the Twinkie epiphany. And it was like one day in treatment, I show up, they ripped my parents basically away. It was in Arizona at this time, 12 years old, and had never been away from my parents for longer than like a sleepover night. And I was like, bye mom and dad. And it was just like, I crying. And then it's snack time, ding dong or Twinkie, choose one. And so I like, choose the Twinkie because it seemed less evil, like less dark, and like I eat it and just like crumb by crumb. And what my realization was like going through that, and the next day is like I woke up and it's like, man, I'm still here. Like it didn't kill me basically, and it really set the tone for like how much like again I'm gonna get through this, even at that age, like resiliency I had. And the body, I call it like 80-20 balance. I see this all the time when clients go on a vacation. Say they go to like Europe or the beach, and they're like, I never felt better. Like I tolerated anything I wanted there. And like, even, you know, they say like European grains are way different. They are, but I think there's also a mental component to being there because celiac disease does exist in those countries too. So I think like when an American, like when we go over there, there's also other factors that you're kind of getting away from that. Like there's like just the body's ability to be more in flow. And even like with food intolerances, I always think it's funny to compare like a food desert, say like East Austin with like yuppies in downtown Austin at True Foods Kitchen, and like just listen to what they're ordering and how they're ordering it. Like, please, I'll get the chicken here, but like, can you sub out this for those sweet potatoes, but no oil, etc. And like, we're intolerant to everything, but then they're like eating Doritos and Cheetos or whatever. they don't know that they're intolerant maybe in East Austin because they have different problems, like kind of like, or any like third world country too,
Right.
et cetera, where they're not thinking about the food intolerances. Their body is just like, give me the fuel to survive and thrive through whatever they're going through.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just the body keeps the score also mentally, emotionally, and how we like. I've overcome every single food intolerance I wanted to overcome. I was eating 5 foods at one time when I got the mast cell activation syndrome and mold illness. When I decided, like, I'm just going to make peace with this today. Like, I go to the well every day. I love it.
Yes.
But and one of my smoothies, they call it the Lauryn smoothie because it's just my favorite smoothie now. But it's got like almond butter and almonds and things that like oxalates basically in it, chocolate. That I was just not tolerating and very fearful, had a lot of rules around. And just remember the first day ordering it and just deciding like, I just want to be normal and body, you're going to tolerate this. And like, it's just like, it's freeing to have those victories. I think a lot of times for my clients as well, where it's like, they don't have eating disorders, but maybe they just have a lot of food rules for themselves that have been from all sorts of like inputs. Yeah. And so the brain and our stress around food really can make a difference, not just in the food component too, with healing. Yeah. From any symptoms or conditions. You don't have to even have like a full-blown disease, but it could be like you're tired all the time and that's been your norm for so long, or you're always constipated. It like, well, are you going to wake up today and like put that Sherpa bag on today and like that old identity, or like choosing a new identity, putting in good tools for healing the gut, but also like up here and our self-concept makes a huge difference in how we feel.
Yeah, that's really like shining a light on the dynamic nature of it. I think in my recent history, I've been focused on if I eat the wrong foods, it's going to stress my gut, which will stress my brain and mental health. But like you're almost really shedding a light on it is, focusing on your mental health, your happipiness, de-stressing, and that is going to assist the gut in processing things too. It's just like two-way or more dynamic than I think I've been.
I always think about like, I was like, before my eating disorder as a kid, I grew up on probably still the Pop-Tarts and pizza and all that, like processed foods. And I'm like, man, I was still a pretty smart kid for as like much like my blood sugar was like always doing this. And like, even like remembering feeling sleepy after lunch every day. And the kids or the teachers would be like, wake up kids. And like, we're all running on our Lunchables and our Capri Suns. But just again, like how high performance we were still able to be at that age, it just shows like how resilient the body is. And also on the food intolerance piece, or just like food, maybe fears or thoughts, I like to give the example of like little Johnny. So say little Johnny, he's 8 years old. He eats a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day for lunch, and he has for years. And then one day, like he starts to get gut issues and then some skin issues over the next several weeks. So he goes to his pediatrician with his mom, and the doctor's like, oh, must be a gluten intolerance and peanut allergy. Cut those things out, see how he does. And he improves. Like gut issues go away, skin issues go away. But what separated like that time in his life compared to like all the other times? Was it just like his cup was full? Well, when he comes to me with his mom, and I'm just like, what was going on in his life around this same time of the intolerance? Come to find out, little Johnny was eating a peanut butter and jelly at the same time he witnessed his parents in the kitchen have an all-out fight that led to his dad walking out, and then eventually their separation and divorce. And like the way the brain and the body keeps the score is it locks that in. And so it starts to correlate this cue. It's an indigestible conflict. I cannot swallow or digest what's happening in front of me. So every time at a subconscious level, his brain is sensing like peanuts and gluten, then he starts to react and respond to that. And so like we are like being imprinted with all sorts of like stressors happening. And that's kind of the beauty of how the subconscious mind works, is it's like going at miles and miles and miles a second. And so and that same analogy can apply to all sorts of conditions, not just food intolerances and not just indigestible conflicts. So for example, like with skin issues, like that can be related to an attack conflict because our skin is like our defense mechanism. Who in life has the most like pimples of all? It's like teenagers when they're going, well, middle school, I would not go back to that. Like mean girls and bullies and all just thinking about like, exactly. All these subconscious attacks. And I mean, even I know adults have skin issues as well. So you could think of attacks as like, it could be self-devaluation attack. Like, I'm not good enough story, or I just never can like get ahead, or I'm scrolling on Instagram and I'm comparing myself to everyone else on there. Like I'm breaking myself down, attacking myself. Or it could be like from, you know, a colleague or a boss that's like, you're just butting heads with, or a partner. Like there's so many variables there, but the brain is mapped for over 1,000 different conditions depending on the specific types of stressors. And this is just like, again, where the body keeps a score. The brain senses the stressor, sends the signal to the gut, which then has a pathway depending on how that stressor was like processed.
Yeah. 100%. Wow. There's like so many things translate into what I see with my patients as a dentist. I have multiple times witnessed somebody who, and I make restorations, like I rebuild people's mouths, and they've had something maybe 10 plus years, everything's fine. And all of a sudden they start just like destroying stuff in their mouth, or things are failing, or the restorations start failing. And I almost have learned to be like, what's going on in your life?
Yeah.
You know, it's great. Like, you know, like, Doc, why did all this stuff break all of a sudden? No, let's talk about it, you know, and then usually it's like, oh God, my mother's passing away, or like we're having a estate sale, or like a conflict in the family. It's like amazing how many times you see these. You described the kid watching his parents fight, and then all of a sudden a digestive thing emerges.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'll have to send you, I have a booklet where the mouth is actually mapped for every tooth, even like down to that degree of like, it's like the back molar, it's like this.
Oh, for different organs.
Exactly. Yeah, and for different stressors too. So like where sometimes the symptom itself can give you a clue into what type of stressor that person's experiencing.
Yeah.
So for example, again, like the indigestible conflict with like gut issues, or sometimes mouth issues as well. Like if I can't chew or digest something. Here, and like the bones are all connected to a self-devaluation conflict, because bone like it would erode away, or so it's very detailed. But the doctor that developed this work, it's called German New Medicine, or German Healing Knowledge, but he had developed cancer, testicular cancer, after his son, he had lost his son tragically in his arms, actually, like to like a bullet wound or something, and for whatever reason they were together, the son gets shot, and so it was testicular cancer is related to a separation conflict. So he was very allopathic though, and like healed from the cancer, but began to get curious on the back end. Like, you know, I was a pretty healthy dude. Like, why did I develop cancer? And then in his general practice, he would see a lot of patients come in with similar conditions that had similar experiences. Like, again, all connected to the specific stressor. So like testicular cancer, separation conflict. Breast cancer would be connected to like a nest conflict. So a lot of women, like when my child leaves the nest, like becoming empty nesters, or it could be like they just had a baby recently, and now they're going back to like work if they don't want to leave the baby at home, going through conflicts like that. And so he kind of got deeper and deeper and deeper into the work, and began to like scan brains of his patients. And he would see concentric rings like on the scans in different parts of the brain, connected with the organs. So the brainstem indigestible conflict would show up like with gut issues for all people. And then when he would get to know their history and like similar stories. So it's really in depth, but it's the brain and the gut connected, because the gut is, again, what sends the signal out to the organ once the brain sends the stressor down there.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've never studied German New Medicine, but I'm aware of it. Yeah. And just in a different, like I was saying before, it's like, I see there's so many areas of your life that affect your health, right? It's not just the one. Like food certainly is foundational. But it's wild to see how all of these things kind of affect your health, and like drawing the connection. So one of the things I think about when I think about gut health that I think comes up a lot is like, or I should say, what is your opinion on things like gluten and dairy and things like food sensitivities? Do you think they go away? Do you think that you can heal them? Is it really the connection, like the brain body connection, or do you think there's like a chemical, it is actually an actual intolerance that's going to be there for forever?
That's a great question. And I think like we have to get to a baseline first and say like, what is optimal for the human and for the human microbiome, like on the food perspective. And so real foods, basically, like what did your grandmother eat, or like what is on the perimeter of the grocery store a lot of times. Like if it didn't swim in the sea, roam the earth, or grow in the land, like it's not real food, is what my nutrition mentor used to say. And so kind of getting a really good idea of like what is real food is the baseline first and foremost. And if we look at like westernized world, like we're eating a lot anecdotally to that. And so I liken a lot of our food system as kind of like, a goat like eats paper, for example, or they'll eat trash and they think it's food, but we know it's not food.
Right.
And so a lot of times, like humans are like commercialization, we see something that's labeled a food, but it's really not food. We've just learned to like make it a food.
Yeah.
Even if it's like labeled keto or whatever the thing is, like the bar or the shake, like, and I think there's like room for error, kind of what we've mentioned. It's not all about perfection, but at least within that like 80-20 or even 90-10 for some people of like eating real food compared to like the not real food, you're just going to feel better.
Right.
And so with things like gluten and dairy, I think it all comes down to like the quality of those things as well, because like raw milk dairy is actually, it is a real food compared to the dairy that we see a lot of times on shelves, which is actually milk is stripped down and it's processed.
Yeah.
So it's stripped of all the probiotic factors and the prebiotic factors and the enzymes that actually help you digest the milk. And so it's just like a different thing that we are calling milk, but it's not really milk.
Right.
And then with gluten, same thing. I think the gluten intolerance we see today is actually like, it's a hybridized wheat. So it's like a man-made grown wheat versus like the real wheat maybe of Jesus's day.
Right.
As well as like, the pesticides and the glyphosate sprayed on it for the majority of glutens and stuff. So I think it's more of a glyphosate intolerance people have,
right?
Which is like Roundup, for if you're not familiar with glyphosate, and that's just bug killer. So we're killing our microbiome. Start. And so, and I think it's just like how much, it's like how full is the cup as well. Like, if your threshold, you're also stressed in your life in other ways, or the majority of your diet is this food compared to like the majority again being like real food compared to a little bit of gluten that gets in there, can change the sensitivity. I do believe we can overcome sensitivities. However, sometimes like it's like we're also starting out with a really gimpy leg. Just for example, as a baby, the first 2 years of your life really determine a lot of the imprinting for your microbiome. I was a C-section baby. I was a formula-fed baby, a processed food baby, tons of antibiotics as a kid, and like vaccines, which had a lot of metals for me, and immune system. Like there's a study that just came out, like a lot of autism cases are related to like those vaccinations. And it's not necessarily the vaccine itself. It's like the organism, the foundation of the microbiome, and like how susceptible you are to autoimmunity to start, as well as the metals. A lot of times the mercury or whatever is like exacerbating that immune system. That kind of like leaky gut, leaky brain. So I think there's variables of our childhood too. So like I'm still very sensitive to gluten compared to maybe other people that don't notice they're sensitive to gluten. I will overtly feel it a lot of times in my gut, whereas maybe a person's like more nasally or like congested, then I say they don't correlate it that way. They have skin issues. But they're like kind of high vibing still. So I think it's just like a dance a little bit, but it's more so the quality of the things that we're eating that maybe not be quote unquote fully clean. So like, I know there's like a whole sourdough movement right now, like of people making their own sourdough, or you go to the farmer's market and there's a lot of awesome like real food kind of gluten-free-ish options as well, which mimic bread. And so that can be really well tolerated by a lot of people.
Yeah, it's so interesting when I changed, because I had a bunch of chronic stuff as well. And when I changed my diet, I think about this all the time. It was like there wasn't gluten-free, like wasn't a thing, And now it's so easy. I feel like if you have to switch, not that you should be eating gluten-free cookies all day long, but there are options, right? That you can reach for to kind of feel that normalcy. I think that people are afraid to leave behind. That's something that I think about often, like with my kids. I've come to kind of the same conclusion about gluten. I just think the grains are so they've just been ruined essentially, so I feel like gluten is just something across the board that most people probably have some issue with, whether like you're saying, whether they connect it or not, and everybody's buckets are different, right? Dairy is one that I think is interesting because I feel like that was the first thing I had like eczema as a kid. And that is the first thing that a lot of people in the functional space and kind of the holistic space will tell you, like, to take dairy out for that and a lot of other things. But I think this movement back to raw dairy is really interesting. And the idea that maybe you can get to a point that you can tolerate it again with that, with it not being pasteurized.
Totally.
And
that's my question. Does this happen frequently where people that were maybe thought they were lactose intolerant, or like I react strongly to dairy and then they reveal, oh, I can do raw dairy just fine?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, a way to dose it up is just do like a shot of milk versus like a whole cup of it as you're building up the tolerance, just in isolation by itself. And it really depends on where that person's coming from. So like, I think 25% of the population has something like the HLA gene, which is a lot of times connected to both celiac and a casein intolerance, which would be more like the milk protein, as opposed to like 70 to 80% of people are like lactose intolerant. So more so if you're just lactose intolerant, there's a good chance that with a raw dairy like introduction, you could tolerate it again because it's got enzymes like the lactase to help you digest the dairy. And like, again, it's in its real food form. Whereas like sometimes the people that still really do have an underlying the casein allergy or intolerance, it may still feel like dairy doesn't make you feel that great. And that's okay. Like there's just like other alternatives to dairy and like, or just other foods that you can eat in place of that. Like even like, creamy avocado, or I love coconut butter instead of cheese. Or there is a lot of alternative milks that you can like buy or make. Kind of not a big oat milk fan, honestly, but of like the nut milks and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've tried. It's not something that I honestly, even as a kid, I didn't like the taste of milk, so I just didn't have it, and that was something actually my parents took out pretty early. But I love cheese.
Yeah.
But in our home, like that's just not something we ever bought, right? So like our kids have grown up without dairy, but I occasionally will try to like introduce raw dairy. But our oldest he'll pour like a 16-ounce glass of it and chug it, and then run straight to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So it's
you're like, oh.
I keep thinking like I would love for them to drink it. They probably don't really have an issue with it, but I haven't quite figured out a way to. I don't know, titrate it in. Yeah. I'm like, what is the plan?
0 to 90 miles per hour.
Right. That's kind of how they operate.
I would start with just like a shot of it. Like you could even put some like chocolate element tea in there, make it a little chocolate milkshake.
Oh yeah. That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. What about, so talking about the gut and just also like the blood sugar roller coaster, just have all these things are connected. What about something that everyone is talking about right now is weightlifting. And you and I are both very active. So are you. And I really value, the role that muscle and building muscle plays in actually in gut health, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I have a cool story from a guy at my gym who was having a lot of gut issues. And like when we just like fixed his gut, or like I gave him a probiotic he should try, he's put on 20 pounds of muscle. So it's just like, again, we aren't what we eat. We are what we are digest and absorb. And like muscle needs nutrients as well. And so a lot of times, like, think bodybuilder community or like any athlete, like they're slamming food, but it's like, if you optimize here, like it's going to only optimize your performance because you're able to actually synthesize and digest those nutrients that you're trying to put in and like get fuel in. And I think like with like muscle tone and just like building, whether it's strength or if you want to like build like metabolic efficiency and just be more like lean and toned, like addressing inside versus just the external outside, it also is going to play a difference. And from a microbiome perspective, what types of exercise the microbiome loves more would be more like dynamic movements and HIIT movements versus like chronic cardio, which is just, if you can imagine like stamping on an ant pile, like you're just stamping out like healthy microbes if you're just doing chronic cardio, because you're staying in this more like higher cortisol state for longer inflammation state. Whereas with dynamic movement or something like weightlifting, like you're just not overly stressing the body as much. So I think variety is very important. Do what you love for movement. I'm not Like I love to move, but I love helping people find like what moves them too, like what they find joy in doing. Because more movement is better than no movement too. Like, but we live in a very active city that is moving. But if like from aesthetic and or fitness perspective, like really focusing also on the inside versus just the outside is going to help your fitness level, as well as like the gains or the leanness that you want to see there. And so that's like how we focus on the inside. There's so many ways to do that, but like what I'm really meaning is like we need a diverse microbiome inside, and most people, like 90% of people, have dysbiosis in the westernized world, meaning it's just imbalanced, and most people have not minded their gut or nor know how it became imbalanced in the first place. But so there's a lot of variables over like a lifetime, diet related, stress related, just like the external influences, not to mention like antibiotics again that we've been on, or like even just chronic dieting maybe that you've done, it maybe isn't processed foods, that just really like messes with the diversity in the microbiome. So a big part of like the functional work I do or the physical work I do is helping people really optimize the mechanics of digestion, like meaning like their enzymes, their stomach acid, the like factory in here that helps like the gut go, not just taking probiotics and prebiotics alone, optimizing gallbladder and liver function. And I do that supplementally, nutritionally, and lifestyle wise. And then some probiotics and prebiotics can be really helpful. A lot of times people will come to me though and they're like, I'm taking probiotics, I didn't feel a difference, or I didn't feel well on them, I was more bloated. I say like 90% of probiotics out there do not contain the probiotics they claim, nor are they beneficial for you, because a lot of them have like a higher lactic acid bacteria in a lot of these strains. And people already have a lot of overgrowth, sometimes up top. It's called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's just like finding the right types of probiotics. It can be a little bit of a Wild West, but with some guidance, it's actually not as challenging as it sounds. But really, diversity of the microbiome, kind of circling back to your question about fitness, is a really keen piece of the puzzle to like, I guess, circumventing a lot of hours and time spent trying to achieve a goal and or like seeing your fitness improve.
I have a tangential question here about detox and drainage, and like as you intake new patients and maybe they're like ill, they're not well, they have a bunch of challenges, and you're like, this is going to be like a long roadmap. When is it like indicated to detox and drain? Like, is it early on, or do you have to like get healthier before you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think drainage is huge. A lot of people, so our lymphatic system is the Nile River of the body. So it's carrying all your nutrients and all the properties throughout, like the healthy microbes to different areas in the body, et cetera. And also flushing out waste. And most people are living in the Dead Sea, or like as far as their lymph is not flowing from either like lack of hydration, movement imbalances they have, just inputs of like toxins. We live in a toxic world, which I think is the elephant in the room of so many health challenges as well, just from an external influence. So getting lymph flowing through like both some lifestyle changes, movement, as well as like I'll do homeopathy a lot of times, some lymph drainage, even like massage, etc., sweating, like all those things can be really helpful. On the detox front though, a lot of times don't start out of the gate with a pure detox. I get them out of the toxic load. Like that's a detox alone. So if they're living in mold or they're just, the inputs are heavy in the toxin. So like I'm using conventional shampoo and conditioner, or drinking tap water, and like there's so many inputs of toxins that we're taking in daily. So if you can just like offload that and detox the external toxins, a lot of times the organisms gets to be in a place where we can be at least a baseline. And then optimizing things like the lymph system and the digestive mechanics, which I mentioned, so the worker bees of the body, especially the liver and the gallbladder function, which a lot of people's livers and gallbladders, go back to 9th grade biology. Your liver is like your recycling system, basically, for filtering out toxins as well as nutrients as well. Every nutrient you intake, everything you breathe in, everything you put on your skin, everything goes through the liver. And that's like the Batman. And then the gallbladder is Robin. So it's the sidekick. So the liver then creates bile, which is waste basically to eliminate. And it kicks it over to the gallbladder, which stores it. And a lot of people just have like congested gallbladders where it's like sludge. And like a gallbladder, typically when we're eating food, should like, it squeezes, so it releases bile and it creates enzymes. But a lot of people, it's just so much, it's clogged that they're just not creating the enzymes, or not eliminating waste properly. So I will focus a lot of my energy on those two organs too. Before I'm even putting an input of a detox, like take this supplement or this antimicrobial or this antiparasitic, etc. That's usually like a stage 2 or 3 that I'm moving into detox. First want to set a foundation for just
drainage first, detox later when it's appropriate. Exactly. Yeah, and think about how many people go into the hospital because they're like, oh, something's wrong with me. And they're either getting their gallbladder removed or their appendix, or because they're like, I mean, there's got to be a bunch of crap in there. Let's just cut that out and you know, probably and give them some IVs, and they leave feeling good. But it's like, yeah,
in that moment. And it's interesting, I think gallbladder removal surgery is the number one surgery, just like because it creeps on like all of a sudden, like it's a goner. But and then
what percentage of our population that we know the diets we've been eating have congested gallbladders? Probably a lot.
But what most people don't realize is like they have a cystic duct, is what it's called, that becomes the gallbladder. So the body still is running on like sludge. And then a lot of times, like I would say 100% of cases of people that have had their gallbladder removed need and would benefit from supplementing with ox bile, is what it's called. It's just like a supplemental bile. No doctor tells anyone this. And so they kind of like, they leave maybe feeling better, but it's like over time, it's like the cup again gets fuller, and they're just less able to eliminate toxic waste.
Down one organ.
Exactly. Down an organ. And so like
very common.
Enzyme and elimination, enzyme production elimination is really challenged, and that can also clog the lymph more. And so we're just running on gimpy legs.
So what role, I feel like there's so many things that cause the gimpy leg, like you're saying. It is like, it's the water, it's your shampoo. I mean, there's stuff everywhere. It's stuff in the food.
Your toothpaste.
Your toothpaste.
I'm gonna throw that in there.
Definitely.
100%.
Your toothpaste. I just lost my train of thought.
You were going to all the different sources of
pharmaceuticals. I feel like this is part of the gimpy leg problem, in my opinion. What's your opinion? And like, can you speak to kind of like what is happening from a biological perspective, like inside the gut, when how pharmaceuticals are affecting like nutrient absorption and why that's causing a problem?
I think the interesting thing with pharmaceuticals is like, we typically don't have a deficiency in what the pharmaceutical is. And so it's like, if you have, I don't know, a statin, you don't have a statin deficiency, like with high cholesterol, which is often prescribed. And so we're really not addressing a root cause. It is slapping on a Band-Aid to like get your symptoms to like, or your, to stalmate basically, but it's not like necessarily healing it either.
Right.
And I think it's just the pharmaceutical industry then captures so many people, and this just like abyss that's gonna like continue to feed them, because it's like they're gonna, like, as far as the industry, because you just need to continue to take the medication in order. And then that's like just where the big pharma comes into play. And I think, I mean, it'll be interesting over the next several years how that changes, if it does, because I think there's a lot of exposure about to happen, which is kind of like the pocketing of like these funds when you could be addressing the root cause, but like then on a structural level or a physical level, it depends on the pharmaceutical, like which pathway it's targeting. But by and large, like leaky gut, intestinal permeability is a big factor here. So like your gut lining in particular is just getting like continually flooded with like just inflammation. And that can be, again, from food or like synthetics or like pharmaceuticals coming in. And so it just over time, wear and tear on that gut lining, which should be strong. And it's a selectively permeable gut, meaning it's going to keep in what is good for you and like release the bad, and help you also deliver nutrients to the body that need to be there. With like toxins, it's actually going to encapsulate them. Like if you have a strong gut, in order to eliminate it, because everything inside the gut actually like is working from mouth to like out, basically. So it is kind of like a bodyguard for that. But if we are taking pharmaceuticals, especially a long time, like it just is like regular prescriptions, and this is generally speaking, like that gut just becomes leakier and leakier. And so it becomes less selectively permeable and just permeable, meaning things leak out that shouldn't leak out into the bloodstream. We get leaky gut is usually connected with leaky brain as well, is what we call it. So it's kind of like a cheesecloth. Yeah. And so a lot of times, like, I mean, even if you think about anxiety and depression, that is $1 trillion industry right there. Like so many people are struggling with mental health issues. And I think a lot of that is the gut-brain connection, yes. But again, the inputs that come in. And it's interesting, we target it with a drug to fix it. But they show in studies, it's like a 25, maybe 30% efficacy rate and of people that are able to actually see benefits from those. Yeah. And I was definitely, I mean, I can speak for myself, was put on them in my treatment days. And I did not feel like myself, and my liver was not optimizing them optimally. But all that to say, one of my favorite studies with like pharmaceuticals and SSRIs in particular is they take one group that has anxiety, depression, puts them on the SSRI, and then the other group gets high dose probiotics, like 900 billion organisms, which is about at least 9 times, 10 times more than most probiotics have, just like on the shelf. And what they found is like an 80% efficacy rate in those that had the probiotic therapy compared to that 25 to 30%. 80%. They modified the gut, which modified the brain, and those results were the same a year later. Yeah. For those people. And that's just like something, if we like, again, address here, it's the Windex of your health. Yeah. And so like just the pharmaceuticals, leaky gut is probably one of the biggest factors there. And it's just like band-aiding symptoms or trying to mask versus like helping you really like transcend them. Yeah. And I sometimes can see like pharmaceuticals as like a bumper lane for health, or like it could be like a bridge. Like if a person's like, I'm really struggling with anxiety, I'm like, and they want to try that for a season while we're also really focusing on the gut. And that, like, then they offload that. Or thyroid medications is also a huge thing I see a lot of my women patients on. In particular, I think women have, it's 8-to-1 ratio, like 8 women have a thyroid issue for every 1 man. Yeah. And so, but a lot of times their numbers look better on paper because the thyroid is like, the medication seems to be working, but their symptoms are the same. Like they're still tired, or they still can't lose the weight they wanted to lose, or their hair's still thin. Yeah. They're like, what's going on here? And it's because, like, again, we're targeting what's actually a gut issue. Yeah. Versus, or we're not targeting the gut issue. Right. We're trying to address the thyroid, right. When that's just like a downstream effect. So a lot of times medications are prescribed for downstream effects, even like with the statin prescription, high cholesterol. It's interesting. They changed, I forget what year it was. I think it was like 2004. The cholesterol numbers of what's normal were changed when Lipitor came onto the market. So it went from like a total of 250 cholesterol to like 199 now, like, or below is like healthy. But it's like, this is interesting. So we start handing out candy. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, they say 80% of heart attack cases weren't a high cholesterol issue related either. And so a lot of times, like, that industry has said, like, this is bad for your heart. It is a gallbladder and inflammation issue if you have high cholesterol, and we need to address that, kind of circling back to the gallbladder. Yeah. And so it's really just looking downstream versus like the upstream, that a lot of the conventional medicine, like, they're awesome for like surgery intervention, or like you got a bullet wound or car wreck. Sure. Like, I want to go to the ER versus myself for that kind of thing. But as far as the functional issues, it's just like, it's a broken model for helping people with the baseline of symptoms that so many people have nowadays as a first line.
Yeah, we're in a really tough situation because I believe that the providers that prescribe these drugs, they would love to have the help of health coaches and nutritionists. They genuinely want their patients to get better, but they don't have these resources like in their practice. And almost all healthcare businesses they're owned by a business, right? It's like, and so they're not going to employ people that don't like generate good revenue, so it's like, it's this really vicious cycle we're in where, like, it's really up to the patient themselves to go like take control of this, because the system is not going to be set up anytime soon to like have the health coach or someone with your training to go next to the person that's diagnosing maybe these other chronic conditions and say, well, wait, before we prescribe this prescription, like, we need to try everything we can, like, nutritionally
I just think of like from a numbers perspective, how inundated it is too. Like every time, if I ever had to go to the doctor's office, I already like I'm planning, I'm going to be in the waiting room for a long time and like see the doctor for a very short time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, it's a tired model. Like the practitioner themselves could get tired with so many patients where it's just, it is easier to just like address the symptom right now. And like, let's put out that fire and then come back if you need me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It really is like up to the patient to take their health into their own hands if they want. And it's not to knock, like, again, I know some amazing, I have some awesome conventionally trained like medical doctors that are like integrative as well. And like, I think it's just finding maybe the right practitioner too. And that's where the interview process could come in. If you do, I like all my patients to have a PCP, but I love it when the PCP is on board with like a functional approach. And so, and a lot of times I found like there's more and more openness to that now because I'm the one that is going to do the deeper digging. And then the doctor can be there if needed for just any emergent kind of things too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there is more awareness. I hope there's starting to be more awareness that like some of these things that, you know, maybe you go to your doctor and you're like, I'm losing my hair or I have constant bloating. And a lot of times like things like that, a lot of times they won't even have an answer for, right? So I think connecting all of these symptoms, right, to understanding like it is the food that you're putting in your body, it is what you're absorbing, it is about gut health. That's like the engine running the body, you know. I think that's really important for people to understand. Like there are solutions to a lot of these things, and there's so much you can do because, you know, pharmaceuticals have their place, sure, but you have to understand they're going to have, like you said, like an effect long term that maybe you're not aware of, right?
I would like to think about this even for those that are even super health aware. Like I think of my women clients that are maybe have hormonal imbalances or they're going through like some, just like all of a sudden I'm having like crazy PMS now, or it's like the perimenopause roller coaster, which is, it's another topic for another day. But it still can come back to the foundations. Like even for like, if you are super high level, like interested and aware and think you're doing all the things sometimes, and a lot of times my clients come to me and they believe and earnestly are trying to do all the things. But what we find is like maybe with the diet, it is so restrictive, for example, or with the exercise, it is so like a hamster on a wheel, or they are just super stressed in their life. And it's just hard to not even admit, but to see, because we function in high stress environments and worlds. But it's like, there's just been extra layers to that stress in a season of time. And so I think just like stepping back, if you feel unwell, and also thinking about like the mental emotional component. So for example, 2 weeks ago, I had like some congestion, cold-like symptoms. I totally gave that to myself because I was saying like, this stinks. I hate the cold. I hate the cold so much. It was like 20 something degrees. I really hate the cold. I hate nothing else in life. But just like the body keeps a score. And I know colds and flus are connected to a this stings conflict. And just like the awareness alone made me laugh and be like, haha, I see where that's coming from. But I do think like kind of thinking the fundamentals, I like to think about a table that has like legs on the table. If one leg is down, the table still stands. But if like 3 or 4 of the legs are down, like your dinner's on the floor. And so I, and my practitioner friends always like will joke with each other, like, it's just about the basics and foundations that maybe don't seem like so sexy. And like all the biohacking world out there is telling you need an IV or hyperbaric oxygen therapy or cold plunging, which are all cool things. Like add those to the foundations though. And some of the foundations I can share with you.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask, what are like 3 to 5 like foundational gut or just general, like you think for health to like support, you know, preventing or supporting some of these things that like can go wrong in the body.
Yeah, kind of like dialing it back to see, checking your box and see where you are at with these. I have 5 gut love habits that are fundamental. So number 1 is hydration. And like, I think it's like 70% of people are dehydrated. They don't know it. Thirst is like a last line of dehydration. So you may not feel thirsty, but just making sure, kind of going back to like lymphatic as well, like, and quality water at that. So if we drink tap water, or even a lot of plastic bottled water, yes, some water is better than no water, but like there really is a difference in the quality of the water. It's kind of like if you were to take a tennis ball and throw it at a chain link fence versus like a marble and throw it at the fence. The tennis ball doesn't go through the chain link fence, but like a quality water with minerals in it is like the marble that goes through the chain link fence. So it gets into the cells and it absorbs differently. And you're not sloshing with it in your gut when you do drink the water. And so hydration, and as well as hydrating foods too. So like a lot of people are eating brown, white, tan foods. Like that's the base of their diet.
Yeah.
And so just thinking like, where is my like organic, ideally produce in there?
Lunch.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And so that's just like that. Even if you think about whatever diet's popular at the time, carnivore, keto, been very popular, or like vegan, there's so many alternatives like burgers and chips and like processed foods, bars that are labeled these things, but it's still, we're eating like very like colorless foods or artificially colored foods. So hydration. Number 2 is boosting digestion. And so kind of circling back to like the mechanics, taking digestive enzymes was a huge game changer early on in my gut healing journey. Like our enzymes are like the Pac-Mans that chew your food, and you naturally and organically should have them, but a lot of people are just like suppressed in them. And so taking some supplemental enzymes can be helpful. Apple cider vinegar shots is another way of like boosting HCl, stomach acid. There's also HCl tablets. A lot of times if you like say eat meat and you feel like it sits like a brick in my stomach, that's like a low stomach acid issue as well. And then enzymes, if you tend to like get bloated after meals or bloated when you eat produce or vegetables, like that can be an enzyme issue. And then it's kind of supporting the gallbladder as well sometimes for people, especially if like greasy foods or fatty foods like make you feel poorly. Like even like we're talking avocados and like butter, like salmon, that could be more of a gallbladder indicator as well. So I just kind of assess the patient and like help them support and boost their digestion. Number 3, so hydration, boosting digestion, fuel. So just fueling your body, protein, fat, and fiber. We need all 3 nutrients and like in their realest food form. Just, and we kind of talked a lot about food already. Number 4, I call it like yin and yang, or like move and rest. So it's a 2-for-1 special there, but like moving in a way that brings you to life like daily, like what does like get those endorphins going, gets the blood flowing, the lymph moving, and just some of that dynamic movement can be really helpful. And then rest, obviously we want to aim for like, it's quality versus quantity sleep. Cause I like am a self-professed, I sleep 5-6 hours. I feel amazing, but I think it's just because of how optimized I am from the inside. I'm also a generator, human design. But like getting that quality in the right amount of quantity. If you're sleeping 8 to 9 hours, you're waking up tired, there's an issue. Just like if you're forcing yourself to run on that 5 or 6 hours and you're like, that's just force, that's cortisol. So optimizing circadian rhythm is huge, which is kind of like the rhythms of the sun. Why we see a lot of like, even the blue blocking glasses and blue blocking screens, like I just always have my phones and computers on yellow basically, because now it's just like I get scared when I see the blue light. It's just like that's the primal response actually. And your body thinks it's running on day number 2 at all times of day when it sees that. And then lastly, I call them breath breaks. So especially like I'll front load the day, morning and evening routine, but just taking those little breaks throughout the day where you put on your oxygen mask. And this can be an actual like literal break that you take. Oxygen mask being like an airplane, put on your oxygen mask to show up in the world. But don't really put on it. You could put on an oxygen mask too. But also just like, that those breath breaks can look different for people, but it's basically taking TOs in the day to not just go mode. I used to work 12-hour days when I was starting my business, and like that was kind of also leading into the sickness. Now I probably play just as much as I work. Like it's a pretty even split, but I value that so much, and it's back to the quality versus the quantity of time. And I'm able to show up more when I do put on my oxygen mask. So
cool.
Gosh, so much of that resonates with, I think, a lot of people, like myself. Everything you said, I'm like, oh man, that's me. Oh man, that's me.
But it's cool how, those are basics that it's like we can know. And yet, like if you're feeling off, like really gut check yourself, no pun intended, of like where you are on those basics. And also kind of like that 6 just is just understanding what is or was going on in my life prior to feeling unwell. Like there was
Mhm.
a time I was feeling well and then something happened.
Right.
I've seen symptoms resolve overnight with just even acute things like that crop up. So, for example, like one of my clients, she developed a UTI. She hadn't had a UTI in like 11 years, like a urinary tract infection. She's
Mhm.
like, Dr. Lauryn, what do I do? I give her all the like supplemental remedies. I was like, wait a second, what was happening yesterday when I talked to you? She was processing a lot of frustration at her partner. And this is
Mhm.
connected to a territorial conflict. And so when I just helped her bring that awareness and like then create a new story from the limiting belief and negative emotions created in that conflict, by the end of that same day, she's like, Dr. Lauryn, it resolved completely.
Yeah.
And she didn't have to take any of the supplements. So it can be like fun as well to help, like just triage with yourself what was a stressor or stressors leading up to this.
I'm like a checklist person myself. Go back through. So it was hydration,
Oh, yeah.
like just list them up.
Hydration, boosting digestion, fuel with good quality fuel, move and rest, like work and play, and then putting on your oxygen mask, breath breaks.
Mhm.
Got it. 5
Yes,
things.
exactly.
I love that. That's an easy.
Yeah,
Again,
my
it's
hit
like someone
list.
that likes to be a checklist, check the box type person.
Totally.
Like,
That's my
write that
version
down.
of 75 hard, quite honestly, is like,
Mhm.
let's check those boxes
Yeah.
and like get connected like with yourself versus like the external, just robotic of like, do this, like work out twice a day or like whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I love those 5, and it really is, you can like dive deep into all this stuff as deep as you want to go, right? And it's like you're saying, it really goes back to the basics. Like
does.
that is really the foundation of health. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And a lot of it is, free or can be, or, it doesn't have to be all kinds of like biohacking, IV, like you were saying, IV drips or
Yeah.
red light
tons of
beds or whatever. And that
supplements,
stuff is
yeah.
all wonderful. But the truth is the way to keep your gut healthy and yourself feeling vibrant on a daily basis is really these like really simple things that we forget because we're all so busy.
Yeah.
And I think deep down, everybody knows it too.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
you can hear that list, and like that's just like everyone knows you
Yeah.
can get off in any of those
Exactly.
categories and feel not well.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for being here, Lauryn.
Yeah.
Tell everybody like where they can find you
Totally.
if they want to see you as a practitioner. I know you've done all kinds of cool stuff, books and TED Talks and whatever. So just where can people look for
my
you?
house is drlauryn.com, and it's Lauryn with a Y, so just DRLAURYN.com. And then my upcoming website will be Total Gut Reset. So that's the company that's launching this year in 25.
Cool.
And so I'll have all sorts of like paths of entry for folks if like you're new to this kind of work, or if you're really wanting to dive deep and work with a practitioner, options there.
Cool. You're expanding.
I am expanding.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing on team for sure within my clinical practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like within my offerings, I have a 28-day gut glow up. I have a 3-day gut cleanse, and then kind of a DIY path as well for people like for the full Monty of all things gut healing.
Cool.
Oh, that's great. It's good to have a place to like direct people now. I can, this is a conversation that comes up more and more. So
yeah,
it's nice to send them your direction.
Yes, and just like at Dr. Lauryn on all my social media. So
cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
This is awesome.
This is so fun.